Om Purusham Artam Shunyanam Gunanam Pratipashavaha Kaivalya Purusha Swarupa Pratistam Vachati Shaktihi iti Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That one primal Shakti force which returns transmigrating consciousness to its eternal home and which strips nature of name and form along the way, accomplishes both of these tasks, and the soul attains to its final emancipation. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So welcome all here into the SRV Association's Loka, which operating grounded in its eternal home, as we just chanted, but here in the Burloka, the physical realms, carrying with it the message of the Dharma to all beings, whom, as Shankar has said, are suffering in the hot desert of thirst and desire, and who want to find that divine refuge. And that chant I just said about not finding fault with the world or with the teachings, of course there's plenty of fault to find everywhere you look, but if it becomes a tendency, whereas the intellect is looking for things wrong, that's called Tarkika Buddhi. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Buddhi, the intelligence, today in this Upanishad we're taking up. Then that's not a good thing. It has to be looking for the positive in everything, noting the negative along the way, because it is through both the real and the unreal, as Sri Krishna says in the Gita, that we are to come to our final conclusion of the Vedanta, which he is the father of, he says in the Gita, in order to reach that final liberation or emancipation. And that's a porthole, a doorway, right out of here into here. And we'll look at that today. For the accomplished yogis, there's really only 5 slokas. I mean 5 chakras, 3 below, and 1 in the middle and 2 above. The heart and this are the 1 chakra to the yogi. And through that we'll pass into the Sahasrara at the time of leaving the body in full conscious awareness of its eternal nature, which is birthless, deathless, timeless, and so forth. I can read you the slokas of this Upanishad we're taking up today for 3 weeks, that is 3 Sundays. The other 18 days you're going to have to look into these teachings yourself, look back on this class and ruminate. We call that manana in your mind. Spend time each day thinking deeply into the sound and the meaning and the deeper meaning of words, which that porthole represents, just like the word or the light, which was in the beginning of all manifestation. So I think I mentioned at the retreat last week, because we've been gone a couple weeks now, we're returning to the Sunday format now, I mentioned that when we were watching the immersion of Durga 2 days ago in the Ramakrishna order at Belur Math in Calcutta, they had been worshipping her for 9 days, and then now they were on the 9th day, and they were taking all the flowers and garlands and ornaments and everything off of the beautiful image. And then as it got dark, pouring rain outside Belur Math temple, all the monks and brahmacharis carried her out over to the river. We were there for that once or twice in our lives. We were watching this on the live streaming, and then immersed her in the river while they were all dancing and singing to conch shells and incense and shouts of Jai and Durga Durga. It was extremely ecstatic to be there, even at a distance. And in the back over Calcutta was all dark rain clouds, and lightning flashes were going off every half minute as they immersed her in this, and it was just amazing. And they had done a graphic that they flashed every once in a while of this big porthole, and the monks and brahmacharis that were headed toward the immersion were walking into this as they walked to Bast Holy Mother's temple, right down into the Ganga River, which is in its Hooghly form there in Calcutta. And then they would come back from that walking out of it. So it was a superimposed image of this porthole. It just reminded me so much of that, how much it looked like the opening of the third eye into the formless light, and how that's mentioned in the Upanishads. So that was a beautiful experience to be on hand for that 9th day immersion, and a totally different world of worship and realization than you find out here, along with its superimposed vision of an inner world that you don't find out here in any way unless you meditate and go within. So we've just finished then the 9 days and 9 nights of Navaratri, worship of Durga Devi. And we were in Portland for 2 weeks. One weekend we had our own 2.5-hour version of Durga Puja. I think it was about the 5th day. And people came to the ashram, and we all worshipped her. And the day before that, at the Saturday class, we were looking into the Amritanada Upanishad for the 2nd or 3rd time in several visits I've made to the Portland ashram. And the next weekend we were looking at the retreat at Windward Waters. There were 15 of us gathered there to keep back the Maya of the world and to immerse ourselves in Dharma and truth, which we did successfully. And we were studying the Annapurna Upanishad at that time. I brought a segment of that retreat with you just to ease us into this 3rd Upanishad that we're taking up now, which is called the Kaivalya Upanishad, which is why I chanted today, Kaivalya Swarupa Pratishta, to be established in the essence of liberation, which is Kaivalya. It's an interesting word. I created a new chart for you, which I'll show you in a minute, of course, and I'll have another one next week on this wonderful word Kaivalya, which has always attracted me ever since I heard it in Sanskrit. It's the name of the Upanishad then, and so I can say that I hope all of you are really benefiting from several years since the Sequicentennial of Swami Vivekananda's appearance here on earth. We started SRVs studying the minor Upanishads, which are in no way inferior by calling minor. They just didn't get commented on by Shankara in his lifetime, with how brief it was. But we've started going through a lot of the minor Upanishads over the years. We ended up finding out, my discovery, I like to say, is that there are some other Upanishads, 6 or 7. We took those up at retreats in Seattle and Portland. And I even wrote a book on one of them, the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad. And so along with that, I can say that I hope everyone's really benefiting from the study of the Upanishads we're doing here. I can tell you personally, myself, that I'm elated to be teaching not just one of them, but 3 or 4 of them at once It's such a wonderful experience for me, and doing it, in by sloka over time, the way it should be done, bringing out the deeper meanings of them, writing charts to them, creating charts for them, and having 3 or 4 going at once is not at all overwhelming for me. They all speak the same language, but the families that created these, called rishis, families of rishis that created these Upanishads, composed them, that is, or brought them forth from inside the eternal Dharma, is the best way of saying it, have had various special ways of expressing them, all their own. They passed them on to their children, at first unwritten. It just came out of their divine memory, and then they transmitted it to their children. Later on got written down, Sanskrit of course being ancient, but you'll find out when we take up the Kaivalya Upanishad here that although the slokas have to be translated from the Deva Bhashya, or the divine, the language of the gods, Sanskrit is called, or Daivivak, you could call it too, the divine words. Although it has to be taken in this day and age to another language, it certainly doesn't diminish the power of it when you hear it in English. So I'll demonstrate that right now, so I can get right into it. Just by reading you the 3 slokas. We're going to take a 3 sloka bite of the Kaivalya Upanishad today, and go on after we chew that a little bit. And you can digest it over the week, and we'll take some more. So this rishi, Aishvalayana, approached Lord Brahma, sometimes called Lord Paramesti, and of course Brahma is of the Trinity. He's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. So he's actually approached his grandsire and says, "Teach me, O Lord Brahma, the knowledge of Brahman, the highest, always cultivated by the good, hidden, and by which the wise one drives away instantly all the transgressions and reaches the Purusha, higher than the high." To him the grandsire, Lord Brahma, said, "Know this Brahman by means of faith, devotion, and meditation, for not by work, nor by progeny, nor by wealth, but by renunciation, some beings have attained to this Brahman and achieved immortality. Higher than the heavens, seated in the cave of the Buddhi that shines, the self-control attain, which the self-controlled attain, who being of pure mind have well ascertained the reality through the knowledge of Vedanta and through renunciation, in the sphere of Lord Brahma at the time of cosmic dissolution, they all got liberated from the highest apparent immortality of the manifested universe." So that was actually 4 slokas, but 3 slokas, but I'll read you 4th and 5th. "In a secluded place, sitting in an easy posture, pure, with the neck, head, and body erect, living in the last of the orders of a religious life, having controlled the senses, saluting the preceptor with reverence, meditating within the lotus of the heart on Brahman, they are untainted, pure, clear, and griefless." So these words come forth in just 5 slokas. And you can say right away that as Aishvalayana came to Lord Brahma and asked this, there was no hemming and hawing. There was no this and that. Here's a qualified student asking me about the truth. Here it is. And didn't waste any time in immediately telling him what Brahman was and how to achieve it, what the criterion are for it, basically. And how some have gotten already liberated, attained Kaivalya, which is the name of this Upanishad, Kaivalya Upanishad. Some of them have attained Kaivalya by this very hidden path, as it was saying here. There is no other way to attain that than this. By means of this, one attains knowledge that destroys the ocean of samsara, outstrips repeated transmigrations. Knowing this one, the knower of Brahman attains the fruit of Kaivalya, or liberation. That's the last sloka of the 25. So this gives us a taste of this, right now, this third Upanishad. And if the San Francisco ashram were still in operations at this time, in 2021, we would be still working on the Amrita Bindu Upanishad, a fourth one at the same time. So all of these are being taken up simultaneously over the months and years, and we're dipping our minds in these. And whereas we also have retreats and seminars and satsangs on Saturdays, and Brahman, God blogs we're calling them, look into the stories of the great seers. All of these things are going on in SRV despite what's going on, or apparently going on, in the outer world, because you saw how nicely it was put there. When they practiced this in the sphere of Brahma, they all got liberated from the highest apparent immortality. That's Brahmaloka. That's not the reality. That's where Lord Brahma resides. Brahman is the highest of the high, it says here. So it's making a swift distinction here as to what Kaivalya is. It's not what people worship here in matter and in energy. But it's higher than that is this worlds of the gods. The upper lokas, we call them, and Brahmaloka being the highest, but that's still the apparent immortality. That Kaivalya leads to a much deeper and singular, non-dual reality of light, like we were describing that portal through which the yogis pass at the time of leaving the body through the third eye into the crown chakra. So with that as an introduction to get us into deep waters quickly, keep up your dog paddling, or your kicking, to stay afloat in this deep water of non-dual truth. Some of you are used to it, have learned how to swim. Some of you still just are wearing water wings out there. And some are not venturing into the depths yet. And the Vedanta can apply to all three of those levels of beings. But of course it won't be available or open to those who do not love God, or have that unique faith, that is, who are still involved in work, progeny, and wealth only, without Brahman. So I was talking about that last weekend too, or yesterday's satsang, talking about that, how they're those people who seek wealth by asking God. So there are four kinds of beings who seek Brahman. One of them is the ones who seek wealth. But it must be said that there are also those beings who seek wealth without asking God, without believing in God. And so their ideal is wealth alone, without any divine reality behind it or in it, and no goal to reach beyond it. Then you've got those lovers, we're putting in terms of the lovers of Mother Kali in this age, and Paramashiva, who's mentioned here, that of course are fully renounced already in the body, and they're not looking for wealth in any way. It comes to them as they need it. So these are the renunciates, and so that's what he says here. By renunciation, this is reached, this highest Kaivalya. Now, Kaivalya is an interesting word, and I'm going to show you a chart on it that's a quick study, but really fleshes out the word. But one way in which we can look at Kaivalya to get started on the actual teachings are these two charts that I've placed here side by side. And the chart I'll have for you next week is going to be titled, "In order to know who you are, you have to know what you're not." That's going to be the title of this chart. It's a saying that I've been using for several years, and I'm finally going to just use it at the name of the chart because, as Krishna even puts it, it's not a great new idea. Na asat vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sataha ubyor api drishantos tu aniyos tattvadarshibhihi, he says in the Gita. Basically, the unreal never exists, the real never ceases to be. That would be a great fact that you'd want to know about. Otherwise you'd be caught in delusion around it, which is why I put these two up. He goes on to say, the truth about both the unreal and the real has been known by the seers. So this is how they cover both bases, so that something that seems real, that's very insidious, and will get in through the finer levels of Maya, will be recognized by them, so they can keep that, as I was saying earlier, at bay, like we did on retreat. And so they study the unreal, as Sri Krishna said, from a distance, never from within inside of it. The mind is in Maya. If it studies Maya, it will never see it. It'll just get involved in the machinations of Maya, all the different changes, parinama. It'll accept parinama, change, as the nature of everything, because it's basing it on a changing universe. The aparinama, the changeless reality, will never then be known. It'll always be veiled or covered or distorted in the minds of those kinds of beings. Even some seekers have not gotten so far as to easily separate the real from the unreal. So I'm bringing this up in these two charts to say that that's really the way I learned the word Kaivalya to start out. Kaivalya was not samadhi yet, the way I learned it. Kaivalya was the separation of the Purusha from Prakriti, the soul from matter. And then after I learned that from the ancient Sankhya by Lord Kapila, in the Vedanta atmosphere, then I started seeing everything as changing, and I started withdrawing from it with my mind. I detached from it more and more and more, until I began to just see that light behind it all, the substratum behind it all, and that the things on top could change, but the underlying substratum didn't. And so that separation of wheat from the chaff, as it was said in old days, even in the Christian religion, was viveka. And then the vairagya, detachment that followed it, was the gift of the Vedanta to give you early on, but at a very high level. One doesn't come to the four treasures and 6 jewels so easily. There's some qualification that's going to have to go on in that case. So to know the unreal and to know the real, then, is what's going to have to happen here. And this Kaivalya Upanishad is going to be prefaced by this. Now, I told you that we were on retreat last weekend studying the Annapurna Upanishad. So I made a chart for that, and I want to show you that second. I want to show you first these 5 eternal essential facts, because this will make a definite distinction between what is real and what is not real, what's unchanging and what's changing, what is wheat with nutrition in it and what is chaff that's empty and substanceless. So the 5 eternal facts, and I'm not going to linger long on them, is number 1, that the soul, Atman, is different from and ever free of nature. That's a fact that will assist the realization of the state of Kaivalya when the soul reaches it. Because if it is the penultimate state to the highest samadhi, then you're going to want to, or have to, make your peace with nature at some point. But it's not so easy, as you'll find out. The second point, all of nature has come out of the soul. As it does, no change takes place in the soul. So here is some deeper information that's going to allow you to remain the same while you make your peace with the transmigration process, while you make your peace with the appearance or the illusion of growth, as you make your peace with the appearance of the body being born and passing. All these things you have to deal with at some point in your life. Better to do them early, Holy Mother said. Everything you want to do of spiritual significance, do them early, she said, because later on you won't have the prana, the energy, or maybe even the clarity of mind to do them, as when you were there early on with your teacher, practicing sadhana, and getting a glimpse of that truth, like that portal. You might have had an experience, like some of us did, of the opening of the third eye after meditating for years. And it was a very unique facet to ongoing sadhana. It made a big impression on you. And so you could never forget that. It put to rest all doubts. And the mind and the speech fall back from that. So that's where you want to, the Upanishads tell us that. So that's where you want to jump in. When mind and speech fall back and the ego's out of the way, that's where you want to jump in and look. Because that's where everything gets revealed in its true nature. That's the edge of Mother Kali's sword after it cuts, the Shakta worshippers say. So all of nature comes out of the soul. As it does, no change takes place in the soul. So the Parinama rule of thumb in Advaita Vedanta stays the same no matter what's going on around it, even at the highest levels of reality, where things like the mind of God disappears and the word is transcended. And Kaivalya leads you into the highest reality and into that not two-ness that the Zen Buddhists talk about. Number 3, as nature emerges from the soul, it does so as mental projection rather than actual creation. There are ways also of singing about this which make it more endearing to us. We would sing something like, for that point, as nature emerges from the soul, it does so as mental projection. Let's see what the Advaita, in my way of thinking, the Advaita might as well have been the one that wrote this Upanishad in another lifetime, because so much of what he sings in his stotram, his Jnanamritam stotram, the nectar of non-dual truth, is just explained so well in this Upanishad. For this he sings, for this third point, Nirmula mula rahitam hi sadodi doham Nirtuma tuma rahito hi sadodi doham Nirdipa dipa rahito hi sadorupoham Jnanamritam samarasam Gaganopamoham. And in another sloka he sings similarly, Nirbhava bhava rahito nabhavami vatsam Niryoga yoga rahito nabhavami vatsam Nishchita chita rahito nabhavami vatsa Jnanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham Jnanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham, which translates again beautifully and perfectly into fine English by saying, I am a create. You know where we're talking about here, right? As nature, Prakriti, get used to these terms, Purusha, the sentient soul, Prakriti, the insentient nature, which has two parts to it, manifest and unmanifest. We'll get to that. So both of these, Purusha and Prakriti, separate themselves in Kaivalya, and then the seer sees itself as being not of matter or energy or thought, but of pure spirit. So this is what he's singing, I am a create. He sees this from that state of Kaivalya, distinct from all worlds projected by the mind. Again, it does so by mental projection, but the soul doesn't change when it happens. I am ever present, never obscured by clouds of might covering, conjured by ignorance. I am the light shining in other objects, self-luminous. I have discovered that I am pure existence, equanimity, and ecstasy. as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. And the 3 E's. It's the existence, equanimity, and ecstasy. So it's like saying, Na tattva surya bhati na chandra tarakam nema vidyuto bhanti kuto yamagmimi twameva bantu manabhati sarvam tasya basa sarvamidam vibhati. Bhati is light of consciousness. Astabhati Priya was one of the old names for divine reality, which is Satchitananda today. So that Atman makes the suns in the sky shine. It makes all the moons shine. It makes all the stars shine. It's the radiance in lightning. It's the power of fire to shine. So that's what he's saying here. It's acreate, but everything shines by its light. Its light's all pervasive. So this is how Advaita sings it in the case of this third point. The fourth point is the soul, Atman, has an eternal relationship with nature. It is, if it identifies with nature, there is suffering. But if it only associates with nature, it sports freely. So basically, identifies there is suffering means there's pleasure and suffering, pleasure and pain. When you say suffering, people who are spiritually inclined say, oh, that pain is, pleasure is a kind of suffering. And it actually puts you to sleep quicker, and pain wakes you up faster. So they would actually probably want to, he who misery loves and hugs the form of death, to him the Atman comes. To him Divine Mother comes. So they'd rather face off with their pain, accept it, and see through misery, crush the stars to atoms, and unhinge the universe. I asked everyone what that meant at the retreat. See, how would you describe that? I said to these 15 people, some of them quite young in the audience, there with the at the retreat. What does Swami Vivekananda mean when he says we shall crush the stars to atoms, we will unhinge the universe? And what does he mean when he says, he who misery loves and hugs the form of death, to him the mother comes? So those are very deep questions that reveal the nature of Sri Ramakrishna's ideal, Mother Kali, and the devotees who follow her, who are going to transcend pleasure and pain, life and death. They're going to deconstruct the unreal. And I'll show you about that soon here. It's going to go by in a flash. You're going to have to hang on to your hats, as they say, or your chutters, if you're in this tradition. So that's how they separate themselves from nature. You might be getting what I'm saying right now, is they'll actually do a process that separates themselves from pleasure and pain in nature, because Sri Krishna has told them in the Gita that takes place in nature. It's not going on in your soul. Pleasure and pain do not take place in your soul. Neither does the projection of all the worlds in space and time take place in your soul. It takes place with the mind's involvement, and takes place at a very high level in God's mind, called the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So you're going to have to even go beyond the Mahat, which is actually what happens when you reach Kaivalya. That's the next thing that happens if you go beyond the Trinity, is that you realize your true nature as being beyond the gods. And there are ways of seeing that too. So, eternal relationship with nature. If I were to sing that again in the same vein, it would be Stulam hino nahi krisham nagatam gatam hi adyantam ajarahitam na param param hi satyam vadam kalu vai paramartha tattvam gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham Gyanamritam samarasam gaganopamoham saying that the soul Atman has an eternal relationship with nature. So the Advaita sings about that here. Sunrise in the morning, sunset at dusk, I see no real change taking place. Still I am present to witness these variations. All is melded into a singular truth, undifferentiated. Yet I am not deaf or dumb. I am just free of ignorance. Therefore I have concluded that I am pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky and infinite like space. About this relationship with nature, again, Brahman requires no proving. It stymies all doubts. Forests and streams, mountains and temples are incomparable to it. With a single eye, one will see it pervading everything, pure, unaffected, ever stationary. And I am that, pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. So that one identity that he's talking about is expressed well in this fourth point on the five eternal and essential facts of existence, of true existence. Let's take up the fifth then. Nature has manifested and unmanifested sides, which I just mentioned, by which knowing the soul can remain free of cycles of birth and death and ignorance. So, unmanifested Prakriti, which I'll show you on a coming chart, is the 24 cosmic principles. And then the Purusha stands aside those, and or we're calling Atman here. Then it's unchanging and has this relationship that is different and ever free of nature, as these verses have sung, and it projects, it's out of the soul with the mind, projects this divine Leela of the Lord. Sometimes they call it the play of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the emanation of the word, Om. There's different ways in which that can be said. Shrishti Sthiti Lai, the projection, sustenance, and withdrawal process that's going on, into which people get into trouble if they fall into that ocean of samsara, instead of staying free of it and remaining the witness of it all, which is, you can see, happens if these five essential facts are known. If it doesn't happen, this takes on. Let's go on to this. Those five essential facts. And from the Untitled Upanishad here, we have this result of having had Kaivalya. This king of yogis, Nidaga, prostrated and then asked his father, Ribu, to reveal the grand science which yields sovereignty over the realm of emancipation. So here we have Ashvalayana, right, asking the Lord Brahma, classic Upanishad. Here we have the king of yogis, Nidaga, asking his father, Ribu, how he got Kaivalya, how he got free, how he saw Brahman. His father responded, I lodged myself in Om, which envelops the root of all phenomena, which we just described here as nature and so forth, and which supports the Bijam Aim, who is independent, who is the independent Hrim. So he's got Om, Aim, Hrim there, these power words, out of which these Lord Brahma uses to, out of the great mind, project all the worlds of space and time. And these words the seers keep track of over time. They're born with that. And if they've somehow forgotten it, they go to the Guru, and the Guru says, Om, I'm Hrim. and then puts it in their mantras, like which happened to me. So I got these bijams given to me by my teacher at 20 years of age or so. So those should wake you up right away. As dense as the Maya is and as forgetful as the mind can become, you wake up when you hear those words. What is that I recognize in that sound? I'm not getting that kind of power out of the words that they're using in school to teach me lower subjects. This is the Paravidya, and I have a connection to it that I should have known by always keeping track of these 5 essential facts, as the Advaita has. That's why he can declare, I'm pure existence, pure love, and pure divinity, and so forth. Which is eternally blissful. She with streaming tresses is the divine Annapurna who fulfills humanity. O Son, I propitiated her with the incantation of 27 syllables cultivated by countless female ascetics. And his father, Ribu, practiced this over and over again, meditating on the goddess, and reached Kaivalya. And now, in this one paragraph, which is just a portion out of that Upanishad we studied, one of the 108 minor Upanishads, as they say, came this realization. And what was it? Then Nidaga performed his father's austerity that same way as his father told him. Many years passed. Then there appeared in front of me Annapurna, wide-eyed, her lotus face beaming with a smile. She said, ask a boon of me. May the truth about the self dawn upon my mind, I pleaded. So be it, she said, and disappeared. A clear perception of the world's distracting variety then arose in my mind, and I was freed. So what is not usually seen in this process of just the several slokas that I've put together in 2 paragraphs of English is that when he was going for the vision of Annapurna, thinking that that would free him, but what freed him was when she disappeared after having the vision, because he saw the 5 kinds of delusion. So if you just had a vision, this is why Holy Mother often says, visions and blisses are byproducts of spiritual life. What you want is character. So if you had character and you had qualification and you had practiced like Nidaga has here under his preceptor's regimen of sadhana for years, and you had the vision you were looking for, the truth comes after the vision's gone. So when she came, the way the world was deluded, and he being a part of the world as he was practicing, came forward to him. So here's the 5 kinds of delusions that people labor under. That was the doorway to Kaivalya for him. The first delusion is that Brahman and Jiva are 2. The second delusion causes the misconception that the sense of agency dwelling in the self is real. The third delusion consists of thinking that the jiva associated with the 3 bodies has any real attachment. The fourth delusion concerns the falsehood that the immutable Brahman goes through changes. That one is similar to one of these. The fifth delusion falsely attributes reality to the world as separate from Brahman. So it doesn't pose like Maya against Brahman. It just says that all is Brahman, and the Maya, like poison in the snake, is there. But if it's accented, the Maya will come forward and veil the snake. If Brahman is accented, the snake is concentrated on, the Maya will just be a part of that, which is very much like this, right? Out of mental projection, the world comes out of the mind, out of the soul. Using the mind, it does so, and it's witness of the mind. The Upanishad mentions a witness here soon, and we'll probably get to that next week with a new chart I've made for that. So, there's a lot more to talk about. Come to our retreat, because the retreats aren't recorded, so you'll have to be there to get the full classes full of this chart that we had. But this gives you an idea of the subject of Kaivalya then. This is pretty much direct facts about the nature of Brahman, and this is pretty much what happens when the delusions are done away with and Brahman stands forth. So Kaivalya happens this way, see, by knowing the unreal and the real. And once you know the real, it's when the unreal goes away, it's when the vision of the real happens to you that the unreal stands out to you as being unreal. Which follows with yoga. Can't get rid of lust, anger, greed, envy, and all that. It just goes back to its seeds and comes out of the mind again. So if you invest yourself with the mind, which Yavadut says, I never did. I never invested myself with the mind. I'm not a prisoner of thought. Thought happens according to my dictate. I use the mind the way I want to, because I'm in Kaivalya, I'm free. So that's using nature, having a relationship with it, right? But without being bound to it, always being free. So that's the distinction here, and it's put forth very nicely in this Untitled Upanishad. There's the disappearance of her that brought about his realization, not the coming of her, not the vision itself. She signals the coming of nameless, formless reality when you're ready. Happened in the Kaivalya Upanishad that way too, if you remember. The pillar came, it disappeared, the gods couldn't understand it, then she appeared. Told them, oh, that was Brahman. You have to seek that, you see. Then they knew what deluded them when she appeared. So she's a remover of delusion. And then what is left over after delusion, after you realize the truth, that is the delusion as it appears in the minds of the worlds and the worldly, and the seekers who are still laboring under that. They're still laboring under those delusions that God and soul are two, aren't they? And it's called dualists. They still believe that they're separate from God. That's the premise of dualism, even in India. So this very unique Kaivalya that Father of Yoga talks about, that's mentioned first in the Tattva Samasa Sutras of Lord Kapila, and is also enjoined upon the seeker to practice through the distillation of the mind stream. That's what I want to show you in a whirlwind right now. So here you are first. In Vedanta it would be this. This is not going to be taught at this time. This is going to be noted. What happens then is like a sugar cube dissolves into hot liquid. In Vedanta, this is how Kaivalya would take place. First, you dissolve earth into water, those two into fire, those three into air, those three into ether. Then, with their concomitants, smell, taste, sight, touch, and hearing. Those are 10 things now that are in Prakriti. Right? You're dissolving the mind stream means you're separating Purusha from Prakriti. Okay? And this is the Vedantic way, actually really yogic way of doing it. Or Yoga Vedantic way of doing it. It's hard to separate them. But let's say this is kind of the yogi's way of doing things. He wants to dissolve everything back. So you understand now by the first two charts and by the meaning of what Kaivalya is that it doesn't matter whether it appears in Vedanta, Samkhya, Yoga, or any other darshan of India, you're separating the Purusha from the Prakriti, and that has to take place. And you have to realize yourself as distinct from Prakriti, not at all identified with it, and also with these facts that it came out of you. In order to reach Kaivalya, that porthole that frees you from name and form. If you're not looking for that, then come back later when you are, and we'll talk more. You see. But this is what the seekers of divine reality are aligning. Kaivalya is a very powerful word then that has to do with non-dual realization. In Samkhya, in Yoga, in Vedanta, all three you'll find it. After those 10 are dissolved, then you dissolve odor, flavor, visibility, tangibility, and audibility. Why? Because those were the qualities of smell, taste, sight, touch, and hearing. Why again? Because those were the little gods in the senses. The Indriyas, they're called. The power of the eye to see, the power of the tongue to taste, the power of the ear to hear, are little powers in you. They're presided over by larger powers. And so you're going outside in, dissolving like this. Then those get dissolved into the 5 pranas which carry them. Prana, Vyana, Samana, Apana, and Udana. And the psychic prana that's in the mind is next. Manas, Chitta, Buddhi, Ahamkara, and I put there in parentheses psychic prana because it's important and not mentioned much. That's the Antahakarana, which he just sang about in, the Abhu just sang about in those slokas. Antaha, he says, I'm not that fourfold process. And then all of this then is dissolving like sugar cubes into hot water, which is the ocean of Brahman. Backward, it's called involution process. Sancharaha prati sancharaha, Lord Kapila says. The outer has come from the inner, and then the inner manifests the outer. Don't forget your 5 facts, that when that happens, the soul doesn't change. But without the soul, it wouldn't happen, you see. Even though nothing happens in the soul, without the presence of the soul, it wouldn't happen. So don't fall into the illusionary Mayavadan theory of immature emptiness. That's not going to work. There is a foundation for everything. It's full, it's present, it's existent, and it's essence. Things might not have any substance, but they have an essence in them. A swarupa, as Father of Yoga says, I just chanted. Purusha swarupa pratista, see. Kaivalya Swarupa Pratista, he said. So that liberation of Kaivalya that you get is gained by staying in a steady state, Pratista, of essence, Swarupa. Kaivalya Swarupa Pratista, that's in the Yoga Sutras. In fact, it's the very last sutra of the Yoga Sutras. That is the 4th pada, last section. Very last sutra is where he makes this declaration about the Chitti Shakti, the mother of our thoughts, and how she takes us all back to our eternal home after she strips name and form away. So this is the stripping of name and form away, that if souls get habituated to it, they're not going to want to let go. If they're not going to want to let go, what does that cause? The ocean of samsara. Souls in rounds of rebirth all the time, over inestimable periods of time. All happening in a dream that's lasting an eternal second, you might say. So we've dissolved everything up to the mind. Now we go on to the Lord's mind. That's where projection, sustenance, and dissolution take place. That's where time, space, causation are originated from the mind of Lord Brahma. That's why Aishvalayana is going to Lord Brahma and asking him for the knowledge of Brahman. Because he knows that his father, his grandsire here, is the Mahat, is a third of the Mahat, an important first third of the Mahat. So you should know better than anyone how I can get Kaivalya. And so Lord Brahma tells him, as we read a few slokas of already. So then also you have to find their causation. And then solidity, liquidity, luminosity, homogeneity, and all-pervasiveness are the very things that turned into all of this from God's mind out to the world of name and form, which is conveniently labeled there samsara, prag, bara. It's a dam of souls, a river that's dammed up that can't get to Kaivalya, so it's being kicked back on itself. And in Kundalini speak, that's the 3 lower chakras that is going on. The Svadhisthana, and the Manipura, those 3, between those 3 are going back and forth this transmigrating soul. And not that where that heart opens, then that's going to be the passageway to the upper chakras, Agya and the Sahasrara, which I'll show you in a minute. So now that we've dissolved everything into the Mahat, which I'll show you soon in this new chart we'll get to, then you can get to Om, the Pranava, the Shabda Brahma, the sound of hate to use the word, but the sound of creation, the sound that is made when projection, sustenance, and withdrawal are coming in and out of. And then Om is dissolved into the indivisible self, and the invisible self is into Brahman. If you want that all at once, the classic and comprehensive meditation in yoga dissolves the elements into the senses into the subtle elements into prana, prana into the mind, mind into the great mind into Om. Find Om in yourself and dissolve that self into the great self. Beautiful summation of all of this in just one paragraph that you can memorize and say to yourself if you're seeking Kaivalya. And this will be the separation of the soul from nature. This is it. You don't have to say, how do I do that anymore? Or have any questions about why you should do it, or have any doubts about that it can't be done, because it's already a fact that you are the unchanging Purusha. You've just identified yourself with changing things. If you want to put it in Samkhya, our old war horse will tell you how. I told you I was going to whip through these charts, because there are classes where you can look at these that have been recorded, look back on our archives, and you may look at these. So if you're doing it in Samkhya, there's the Purusha at top, the sentient soul, the conscious spiritual entity, also could be called Ishvara, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva level of consciousness. And there's Prakriti following it, insentient nature or the non-self. Self, non-self, non-self, self. These two have a relationship, as we just found out, but that relationship can become binding if ignorance is a part of the quotient. So you always keep yourself in knowledge that you're the one that projected this with your mind, just like the mind of God projected all of this with its mind. So it's all mind made manifest. It's all thought concretized. But their thoughts were great thoughts. And then they trickled down through those 24 cosmic principles that you had to dissolve to the solid earth, which is the 24th. Everything became solid in that process. So there's the Mahat we just talked about. There's the Buddhi, the intelligence, which is mentioned here. In the cave of the Buddhi shines that intelligence, which is allowing you to at the heart center, the cave of the heart, to do this process, to recognize that it needs to be done. So out of the Buddhi comes the ego, ahamkara, with its sattvic and its rajasic and tamasic, gunic constituents. And those are what we just looked at in the last chart. Hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, smelling, speaking, acting, moving, sexuality, elimination of waste. And then there's the audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, and odor. And there's, at the end of the whole ladder, ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Okay, all clear? That's everything except this is Prakriti. Unmanifested here, as one of those facts of existence told us, manifested more and more as it comes down into the realm of the 5 senses and 5 elements through 3 bodies. Is another thing we might want to look at. And how does it happen otherwise? Did I bring another example? Yeah. Vedanta's example of the 5 sheaths. Then I'll quit torturing you. When you see that, what's the distinction between the real and the unreal? What's the asat and sat, as Krishna mentions in the Gita, and why they study both in order to receive liberation or Kaivalya? And then you'll be on the right track with your thought process with a great Upanishad like this, and everything that has occurred through the period of Samkhya Yoga, which is thousands of years prior to Jesus, through to Yoga, which is 140 years after the process of Jesus, that is Patanjali's Yoga, and all the way to Vedanta with Vedavyas, right up now to Swami Vivekananda with his Neo-Vedanta, or what we're calling Advaita. They've been doing this process all along. They've just been describing it to you differently in different ages with different darshanas to keep encouraging the people of those changing times to do your sadhana with this. It's in here you do it. Don't be deceived by thinking that it happens in the body. Why? Because not by work, nor by progeny, nor by wealth do you attain immortality. You may be able to attain apparent immortality. This is like the message of the first two slokas of that Kaivalya Upanishad. So he's giving you the yeses and the nos about this. Just so that's a kind of separation. See, this kind of separation between the sentient and the insentient has to be accompanied with the kind of sentient between the kind of discrimination between what's true and what's not true, what's real and unreal in your thought process. They'll tell you what it's like in philosophy and give you the names and the methods for it, but you have to do the work in here. That's separating the wheat from the chaff. So there's two kinds of inroads you have to make into Maya like that. One's philosophical and one's personal, individual. And so you follow up the teaching that you're getting in the Dharma by sadhana, and then you achieve the goal of human existence. If we wanted to look at it in the 5 sheaths, you could see how they simplified it for us. 24 cosmic principles, I really have to know all that. No, you have to unknow it. It's basically, it's the answer to that. Or do I have to look all the way back to dissolving the mind stream and do that practice? Well, that's a very beautiful practice, by the way, because a lot of the karmas and problems that you have are lodged in with some of those insentient tattvas, just like bubbles collect around each other. So you have to find a way in there, and the way in there with yoga was to meditate on them, dissolving them in the mind stream, using them as alambanas, so that you get to those things, you see them, I espy you, be gone. And with the laser of your intelligence, from the buddhi dwelling in your heart, you dissolve those things, they're gone, and they don't come back and belabor you anymore. And you're free. He says, then I was free. He said. After Annapurna appeared, then I was free. See, she left, and she showed me how the delusion had been in the mind of collective humanity, and in my own mind too, tendrils of it. She came and just took it away, and then I saw the truth. It was a revelation. It was probably beyond revelation. So, if you're doing it through the 5 sheaths, what is it you're going to be dissolving? From outside in isn't a lot different than all of that, because tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, and smelling is pretty much what's happening there. Earth, air, fire, water, and ether is what's happening there in your physical sheath called the Annamaya Kosha, sheath of the body. So deha has to go. Actually 3 dehas have to go. Trideha. You have to know that you're not the gross body, you're not the mind, which is the subtle body, and you're not your deep sleep state, which is a causal body you have too, which keeps you from Kaivalya. Deep sleep is very close to Kaivalya, but it's not Kaivalya. It's intelligence unconscious of itself yet. Pragya, they call it. So you're not aware of that, hands-on with it in your deep sleep state yet. But you definitely feel it, don't you? Because you wake up refreshed from that state. So dissolve the Annamaya Kosha, dissolve the Pranamaya Kosha, the sheath of energy. Prana is not just kinetic or electric energy that we are all obsessed with out here in science. Prana is a very fine energy. We had a beautiful new chart on that at the retreat last weekend about the Vedic Pranayama, how to do it, as opposed to pranayams of without consciousness attached to them, like pranayama and hatha yoga and so forth. But if you do the Vedic Pranayama and the Tantric Pranayama and the Yogic Pranayama, you'll attach it to the three worlds, Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha. You'll attach it to waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, and you'll attach it to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and your in-breath, held-breath, and out-breath. And all of these things you're doing, as you say with one breath, repeat after me, Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimo Hi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Now let's do that 2 more times. Then you've done your Vedic Pranayama, which, if you've attached it in your mind as you're saying it to those sets of threes I was just telling you about, benefits you 100 times more than just saying it. That's how they say it in the Vedas. 100 times more. Each pranayama you'll do, which also includes your mantra. If you attach your mantra to that deep knowledge, it'll benefit you 100 more times, and it probably won't benefit you hardly at all without making those connections in your mind before you say it. So everything needs a qualification. Everything needs a preparation to work. It's been one of my themes in the last year or two, is that Vedanta is not working for many practitioners yet because they haven't satisfied the lower requisites yet. It cuts at the throat, Vedanta. I mean, you start high already. You're probably already at the heart chakra when you get into that. You just don't know it. And maybe you're having some issues with lower chakras still. Then go back and look where they come from. In the tattvas, your attachment to the tattvas is where they come from. So meditate on the tattvas, find them and do away with them. That's your sadhana. And it's all done in here. It's the mind that projected it. The Purusha was behind that. It projected it in the ignorant way, fell into samsara, now found its mistake, drew itself back, and saw that this whole thing was Brahman. And so if you were in it, dissolving the mind stream was one way of doing it. Dissolving the 24 cosmic principles of Prakriti and knowing that the Purusha was higher and better than them, higher than the Most High, it says here. Or taking the Vedantic teaching of the Atman has been covered by 5 sheaths, like the kernel of a coconut. And dissolve that, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, then the mind, Manomaya Kosha, then the intelligence, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and then that ego, Anandamaya Kosha. You shouldn't worry about it, the ego, until, because along the way it'll get ripened. If you're doing this process right, the ego will disappear. It won't be a problem anymore for you, including the problem of a spiritual ego, they say. So you just have to keep doing the practice, sadhana it's called, continue on with the process, just like Ribu did, and just like his son did. And what Aishvaryayana is trying to find out from his father Brahma, how he did it, and became Lord Brahma in that Mahayuga, in that great period of time. So, other things on this chart, but I told you I wanted to show you 3 ways in which Kaivalya happens in 3 different darshanas, and that's 3 different methods, and they all amount to pretty much the same thing with some extra details in some of them. If you have the wherewithal to do it, and you know that you can disidentify with body, energy, mind, intellect, and ego, that's it. The 5 sheaths, you just disidentify with them, know they're your projection. You can still use them, the Avadut said so. I'm not a mind, but I use it. The thoughts I use the thoughts, they don't use me. So all of this is return to self-realization or mastery. Somehow you lost track and lost hold of the powers that you had, and yoga wants you to get those back. So you'd start out to qualify yourself with the Gayatri, breathe 3 times in connection with those teachings. I reiterate that because it's so important, and we spent at least an hour on that at the retreat last week. We qualified ourselves in every Vedic way we could before we picked up the Untitled Upanishad. And so we spent a good hour the first morning saying, now we feel qualified, now we feel qualified. Because we've all been taking the Dharma and SRV for some 30 years now, some of us less, the newbies are coming and so forth. But I said, well, this is what you do to qualify yourself, and then you look it over every morning, including saluting your guru. Didn't he say that? Sit there self-controlled, spine, neck erect, and so forth, salute your preceptor, and do this. This dissolution of the mind process, if you're an adept at the practice, can take you all of 10 minutes. If that. You could probably do it in 1. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that. But you know all of them. You're not just like, speed reading some sort of list, and most of it's going by and you're not in cognizance of it. There's no such thing as sleepy samadhi or unconscious awareness. Those things don't exist. It's ever aware, and it's spontaneous, and it's lightning swift. It's like the highest intelligence, only devoid of conceptualization, Gaudapada says in his commentary. So we have 15 minutes in this half, I think, and all of this has been a precursor to let you know that we are in the Kaivalya Upanishad, what Kaivalya means, how it can get affected and sustained in your practice in at least 3 different ways here. I could have brought a number of other charts to show you how else it can be done in other darshanas of India, like Shaivism and so forth. But that leads us up to this new chart, which I want to show you so you can at least get used to it and look at it over the break if you want. So I put this together late last night. I think it's probably the quickest chart I ever put together, but I had done it all in my mind before I put it on paper. And when there's interesting, this is 365, number 365, so that's how many days in a year, I think. So if I had it all together in my mind when I first started into it, I could have done footfalls or this process in a year, right? 1 a day. But it took me several years. So I found out over the process that it's just like I did with puja. When I memorized the puja, that I was enacting the puja in my mind. I wasn't memorizing it just so that I could go perform it somewhere. I was memorizing it, and as I did it in my mind, it was happening. So that's putting your consciousness together with all the details. Oh, I memorized that. Yes, I can do that. I go there next, and then I have to do this. I have to purify that, and so on. But you're actually doing that. If you're actually doing that when you're thinking it, as you're memorizing it, then you're doing puja all the time. And that's the way Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are. That's the way the Mother is, worshipping all the time. That's the way the yogis are. They're worshipping every second the divine reality. Their life is worship. And so it would take you a while to figure that out if you're doing it mentally or intellectually or philosophically. And this is what brings you closer and closer to Kaivalya. So Kaivalya here is, I subtitled this, Isolation of the Sentient Soul from the Insentient Nature. So those 2 terms are very important. There's nothing in nature that shines by its own light. The Purusha is that light. And surprisingly, that includes Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Those 3 are in you. You meaning the Purusha. You meaning the Paramatman, the true self that he's going on and on about when he sings these slokas, and that Krishna is speaking from through all 18 chapters of the Gita, is that one all-pervasive, indivisible Brahman. that is the only reality. That's all that exists. There's nothing else but that, and thou art that. They always say that. There's nothing else than that, and thou art that. They want you to make that final connection, which is the last coffin nail in the graveyard of Prakriti, where you say, I am not anything that changes. I'm not anything matter, material. I am the pure sentient self. I am pure conscious awareness. That's me. Found myself. The game of hide and seek is over, and I win. I am that. Even Sri Ramakrishna explained it as that. The kids play find the granny, he said in the gospel. That's our hide and seek in America. And we were playing hide and seek when we were kids, over there in Oregon, where I just came from when we were growing up. So hide the granny, so you have to go find the granny, So that's what we're all doing in this game of Prakriti, or call it Maya, or call it Leela, if you can manage that. And then when you find yourself, the whole thing is over, the play is over, the game's over, and thou art that. And as you were playing the game, you were that too. And before the game even came to your mind, you were that. So there's nothing but that in existence. And Kaivalya is one of the most beautiful words that takes us up to the gate. As this chart depicts so nicely, you can see there, Kaivalya is that light that the meditator there, who is the Purusha, is mind is being taken up to that. At the top there's just 2 chakras, because the opening to that light is gotten through here. And that's why I'm saying I don't see much difference between heart, anahata or hridaya, and throat, agya, and I'm saying throat, vishuddha, and third eye, agya. I don't see much difference between those now as I've practiced. Those are just one chakra to me. And as consciousness runs a boat race between the 3 of them, I'm quoting Sri Ramakrishna, my mind ran a boat race through these 3 chakras. Every once in a while, in that boat race, it sees this beam of light. And it's not just a depiction, you actually see a portal opening. And I can leave the body through there. And sometimes you're willing, see, and it closes up on you. Other times you're not willing because you're thinking, I'm not done here, you see. For whatever reason, I'm not done here. So if your mind is in a kind of rajas or tamas guna in that particular cycle, you're probably going to feel that latter. But if your mind's in the sattvic period and is ascending and is attuned towards Kaivalya and is qualified for samadhi and all those things, then that you're going to want to make that final bridge to immortality. You're going to want to loose your soul from nature and dissolve into the light. This will be an actual experience that you will have. And that'll be dropping the body and everything that's associated with it. Because you're dropping the mental body too, and you're dropping the causal body too, which are gates that, of their own, which you pass through, where the gods are and the ancestors were and so forth. You made your way through them. Now we can take 5 or 6 of these charts and show you how the Kundalini yogis would see that through the chakras. And we could take another chart and show you how it's done through the lokas, the 7 Bhur, Bhuva, Swar, Mahar, Jhana, and so forth, how the old Vedicists looked at it. We can take a chart and show you how the Shaivites looked at it when they came to the 12 higher tattvas that are more sentient than what we just saw here at a later age, and how they reached into that portal. So this is a very nice depiction of light. And I think this light is ascending. And I don't think it's like an escalator down. It's like, it's not even going to appear to a person until they want freedom from the body, from suffering, from the worlds, of name and form, and they don't want to return again, necessarily. This is the path of the sun, and not the path of the moon. It's the sunlit path, it's not the gray smoky path that's talked about in the Gita. The two great paths, they're called. Yogis could take the smoke-filled paths and come back by it, because they have that kind of prowess spiritually. But anyway, you can see how this chart is well apportioned for that. There's the Mahat in the distance, is this vortex in the back. And the gods and goddesses are these bubbles you see on the side here of worlds that are not quite in alignment yet with higher worlds like heart, throat, third eye. Those are the gods and goddesses that are inside of you that you will use. Over here is the ethereal realms, where Bhuvar Loka, and over here is the ancestor realms, the Pitri Loka, or Swahar, it's the heavenly realms. So those are on either side to the back of the meditator. He's making his and her way through that. There's Prakriti there. There's Purusha there. And there's Kaivalya there. And there's the higher chakras to reach, Agya and Sahasrara. The 2-petaled lotus to the 1,000-petaled lotus, they call it. And this is an inner journey that's taken by fully qualified souls, rishis, yogis, and Ishvara Kotis and so forth. This Prakriti here, you can't see it all until you get up close to it. All these flowers and leaves have names on them. Well, there's earth, air, fire, water, and ether. That's a part of Prakriti. And don't forget that in your dream state there's also earth, air, fire, water, and ether. So there are 5 subtle elements too. We looked at these. You have to make these associations. So you take the gross elements here, and your consciousness lifts off them and goes to the next realm, the mind, the dream realm, and finds 5 elements there too to play with, just like in heaven. And then not till it goes to the causal realm, aligned with deep sleep, those all disappear. So the point here is that you're dissolving, you're doing this process every 24 hours if you go into deep sleep. If you still have the blessing of going to deep sleep. If you're not running yourself ragged in nightmares and dreams, or drugged out, and your mind is just not, it's lost the ability to find peace on its own. If it's just a natural person going from waking to dreaming to deep sleep and back, without these latest problems that people are inundating themselves with, their minds, and brooding and so forth, and depression and all that, then you're doing the dissolution process every night. Comes to find out that you're doing the dissolution process when you breathe in, hold, and breathe out. You're doing that then too. So we looked into that at the pranayama teaching at the retreat, because the Untitled Upanishad teaches that. When you breathe in, you're taking in all your knowledge. And when you're holding your breath, you are all knowledge. When you breathe out, you're giving off all that you're not. So that's the dissolution process. You're breathing in everything you want to know. You're holding it as knowledge. You're breathing out everything that's not knowledge, that's ignorance. That's what you're doing. You're separating the Purusha with the Prakriti every breath and every 24 hours and so forth and so on. Or as Shankar likes to put it, breathe in, I am Brahman. Hold, saying, I will always be Brahman. Breathe out, saying, I am not the world. That's how you separate the Purusha from the Prakriti. And keep that realization in whatever lifetime you're to take afterwards, if you take any at all. We could probably break here, because it's been a big 3-sloka bite of the Upanishad, Kaivalya Upanishad, remember the word. And the separation, that's the one separation you really want to make, is this between wisdom and ignorance, you might call it, or wheat and chaff, or real and unreal. You found it mentioned by other great souls in other religions, than India's as well. So let's break here because we can come back and take a look at the quotes, and this will launch us on into the another hour of Kaivalya Upanishad after the break. Jai Shri Guru. Namaste.